صلوات صلی اللہ صلوات صلوات پھاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پھاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ کیسے پڑے ہیں جسم کے ٹکڑے جدا جدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پھاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ ہائے ہائے میرے غریب کا کیا حال کر دیا، گوروں سے لاش دشت میں پامال کر دیا، پہچانو کس طرح سے بدن سے ہے سر جدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پھاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پہچان لوں گی میں تمہیں، آواز مجھ کو دو، دم توڑتے جو دیکھا ہے کئی جوان کو، آنکھوں میں اب بہن کی اجلا نہیں رہا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پھاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پہچانا تمہارے لیے بھی کٹن ہوا، دیکھا ہے پہلی بار جو زینب کو بیردا، آتی ہے شرم جلد بتا دو مجھے ذرا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پھاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ کرتا رہا ہے زبا کی کوشش کہاں کہاں، خنجر کے ہے کٹی ہوئی گردن پہ بھی نشان، کاٹا ہے کس طرح سے ستم کرنے گلا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ پھاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو؟ کیا لے گئے لوٹ کے سب کچھ یہ تن پر بچا ہے ماں کا یہ کرتا سلا ہوا، نکلے تھے جب قیام سے یہ حال تو نہ تھا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، پاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، آہستہ سے جواب دو، ہے ساتھ اس کی ماں، کیا اب تمہارے پاس ہے معصوم بے زبان، ننھا سا لاش کسے کا یہ سینے پہ ہے رکھا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، پاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، دیکھو بندی ہے ہاتھوں میں میری برسیاں، اب اور لو بہن کی نہ غربت کا امتحان، کچھ تو جواب دو مجھے سگیرا کا واسطہ، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، پاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، وہ بھی تمہاری طرح سے زکے میں نہ ہو کہیں، دل کو میرے یہ لگتا ہے موجود ہے یہی، آتی ہے ماں کی رونے کی نزدیک سے صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، پاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، زینب پکارے میرے تکلم بصد ملال، کیا مرتے وقت بھی میرے پردے کا تھا خیال، ہے مٹھیوں میں کس لیے یہ خاک کربلا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، پاتر ہٹا کے لاش سے زینب نے دی صدا، کیا تم میرے حسین ہو، صلوات۔ صلوات۔
I wish they never called me al-Banin. I raised 5 sons and not one would remain. Where are her sons? No Abbas and no Hussein. No Abdullah and no Jafar, no Uthman, son of Haydar. Not a son beside me, only memories when I see my shadow. Hussein, my eyes sees, let me see them just once before I die. Please let me just once sit with them. Let a mother see her children. Tell me how patient can a mother's heart be. al-Banin, and yet not a son with me. A mother without sons, what a tragedy drenched in tears. and I live in it for months and years. I see them coming to Medina. Just ahead I see Zainab and Kulthum. Just ahead, but Hussein has no body. Just ahead, and his body lies fallen in Karbala. I'm left complaining to no one and nobody. I cry out and comes to help me nobody. I just see Hussein's head and nobody. They tell me my son's head was raised on a spear. I walk to Karbala, me and the angel side by side. When once was me and my son side beside. I saw the bodies at one. I saw it and I sighed. Beside the only whose flag would no longer flutter. I looked around for my sons. I counted 4. But when I looked back at Hussein, I couldn't remember what I counted for, so I made sure that my sons were all accounted for, and that their blood flowed for the son of Fatima. And here's me, not struck by lightning, but by awe struck, thanking God that they were killed or cut or struck. I hold the flag of Abbas as I am left awestruck, and wear it as a hijab, as a proud mother. al-Banin held the hands of Abbas feeling grateful, and wore her hijab using the flag of Abul Fadl. And with her Lord she conversed. Thank you, Allah, for Abbas. When Allah the Almighty created the stars, He told al-Banin, pick 4 and they are yours. She would pick 3, but in her eyes something glitters. He descends and what he does, the sky shatters. The flag he holds sings her praises when it flutters, and it besides his mother's orders. Nothing matters. What a sight when Abbas and al-Banin would first meet. The feathers of Abbas's helmet bow down to her feet. O Lord of the universe, thank you, Allah, for Abbas. al-Banin was a mother like no other. When she'd walk, a moon and 3 stars would circle her. If she ever wept for Abbas's flag, would shudder. If she slept, it stood over a protector. Where is the flag that every son gives his mother? You'll find it in the hands of Hussein's flag bearer. Because of Abbas, al-Banin conquered motherhood, and in return al-Banin taught Abbas brotherhood. Should say in better or worse, thank you, Allah, for Abbas. Testifies God when Abbas's soul he summons, only daughters of lions give birth to lions. If when Ali was born, the house of God opens, what houses open for al-Banin's 4 sons? When Muhammad was attacked, Ali's skin toughens, and when Hussein's in fear, Abbas's blood thickens. Like when all ran away, and by Muhammad Ali stood, Abbas stands guarding his Hussein, a mountain of Uhud. After those who'd ran, she'd curse. Thank you, Allah, for Abbas. When Abbas, with severed hands, was struck on his head, al-Banin came and she closed his one eyelid. He'd not fall to the ground, but in her lap instead, she'd use her tears to wash away the blood he'd bled. She took his flag and placed it over her forehead. I wish I had 10 more to give away, she said. I wish I had 10 like Abbas who could die on this day. All who recalling Hussein water they'd throw away. Her prayer, a descended verse. Thank you, Allah, for Abbas. al-Banin had left this world sonless, but proud that the severed hands of her sons had never bowed. This is the only mother who ever had vowed that when her sons died, no water he would be allowed. The grave digger tries to shroud her. She cries out loud, how can I have a shroud when Hussein has no shroud? al-Banin is laid to rest, and beside her grave stands a headless Hussein and her Abbas with 2 severed hands. And in prayer they would rehearse, thank you, Allah, for Abbas. Salawat.
صلوات پر محمد و آل محمد.
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
جس نے شبیر سے وفا کی ہے، جس نے شبیر سے وفا کی ہے، اس کی مرضی بھی اب خدا کی ہے، اس کی مرضی بھی اب خدا کی ہے. اتنی قیمت نہیں فرات تیری، جتنی عباس نے ادا کی ہے، جس نے شبیر سے
فاتحہ. اللہم صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.
قید خانے میں تلا تم ہے کہ ہند آتی ہے، قید خانے میں تلا تم ہے کہ ہند آتی ہے، دختر فاطمہ غیرت سے موئی جاتی ہے، روح قالب میں وہ زندان سے گھبراتی ہے، بے حواسی سے ہر ایک بار یہ چلاتی ہے، بے حواسی سے ہر ایک بار یہ چلاتی ہے، آسماں دور زمیں سخت کدھر جاؤں میں، بیبیوں مل کے دعا مانگو کہ مر جاؤں میں، بیبیوں مل کے دعا مانگو کہ مر جاؤں میں، در زنداں پہ ہوا اتنے میں امبو ہے کمال، بول دربان کے بڑھے دولت و عمر و اقبال، قیدیوں اٹھو دعا دے کے کرو اس تقبہ زن حاکم کا ہے زندہ میں نزول اجلا زن حاکم کا ہے زندہ میں نزول اجلا تم کھلے سر تھی حضور اب تمہیں چادر دیں گی رحم دل ہیں ابھی زندہ سے رہا کر دیں گی رحم دل ہیں ابھی زندہ سے رہا کر دیں گی لونڈیاں تھیں زن حاکم کے جلوں میں جو رواں دیکھتی کیا ہے کہ کشے ہے آہن میں نہاں لاغر و خستہ تنو فاقہ کشو تشنا دہاں منہ پہ سیلی کے نشاں پشت پہ دروں کے نشاں منہ پہ سیلی کے نشاں پشت پہ دروں کے نشاں ساک پاؤ کو سے زنجیر میں تھراتی ہے استخوانوں سے لرزنے کی صدا آتی ہے استخوانوں سے لرزنے کی صدا آتی ہے گرد عابد کے پھری پھر وہ بہا لے تغیر رکھ دیا پاؤں پہ سر اپنا ہٹا کر زنجیر بولے وہ کون یہ چلائی کنیز شبیر اے سلام رسنوں تو کو سلاسل کے اسیر السلام رسنوں تو کو سلاسل کے اسیر ہے وصیت کا محل مرنے پہ تیار ہے تو کچھ کفن کے لیے رکھتا ہے کہ نادار ہے تو کچھ کفن کے لیے رکھتا ہے کہ نادار ہے تو غم نہ کھا گورو کفن میں تجھے دوں گے واللہ ننگے سر تیرے جنازے کے چلوں گی ہمراہ مرنے والے تیرا کیا نام ہے کب سے ہے تباہ بولے مولا ابھی 35 برس جینا ہے بولے مولا ابھی 35 برس جینا ہے نام بے کس بھی ہے قیدی بھی ہے نادار بھی ہے حال یہ ہے کہ اسیری بھی ہے آزار بھی ہے حال یہ ہے کہ اسیری بھی ہے آزار بھی ہے قید خانے میں
It is humbly requested to please recite Surah Fatiha and 3 times Surah Ikhlas for Rayyan Ali Haider Ibn Ansar and Narjis Haider. Without wasting any time, I request Dr. Kirmani to the member with a Lord Salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا صدق الله العلي العظيم زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد My respected elders, brothers and sisters, youngsters in Islam and Iman here in Chicago, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question, what is the future of our community? We began a conversation last night concerning the future of our community and our generations, and we built this conversation on the last conversation that we had last year. And we revisited some of the things that we discussed last year to recap, and then we laid the foundation of what we'll be discussing in the next couple of nights. And we began that conversation last night. One thing that we need to understand that as we embark on the future of our generation, we need to figure out what is strategy. And strategy is something that is needed in order for us to succeed in our businesses, in our organizations, our institutions, and of course in our Husainiyas and our Imam Bargahs. Now, what is the difference between a strategy and a plan of action? Although many times they are used synonymously or they're used in the same way, there's a slight difference. In terms of a plan of action, a plan can simply be step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you have a plan. Strategy requires a little bit more thinking. Strategy requires that what are the effects of this plan of action? And sometimes you need to think about not just one aspect of the equation, you have to look at other aspects of the equation, which I'll try to make clearer in a moment. But when you come to the area of military, you will find strategy. When you come to the domain of politics, you will find strategy. When you come to the domain of business, you will find strategy. And indeed, when it comes to our communities, we should have a strategy if we don't already. And what I mean is, if you go to the top military academies in the world, they'll study the works of, for example, Sun Tzu and the art of war and military strategy. You'll go to, for example, the business world, you'll find business strategy, which I'll explain in the next couple of nights, inshallah. And you'll also find other forms of political strategy in our world. The question is, what is our strategy for the development of our community? So in our conversation tonight, I want to begin by first looking at where did we leave off yesterday, very quickly, number one. Number two, what is the Quranic and Islamic motivation behind this conversation, and why is it so important and so valuable? And how does it connect to the movement of Imam Hussein, which we are ultimately here to commemorate in the nights of al-Banin? The third level, what is the analogy of the cave, or the allegory of the cave, and what can we learn from this allegory, and how does it relate to you and I in the 21st century? The next thing I want to look at is, what is the theme of the Quran from beginning to end? If you were to highlight some elements that are the themes of the Quran, what comes to the forefront? number 5, is it possible, and has it been historically possible, for us to truly get Islam? And if so, how do we get our Islam? Does the means and the mechanism matter? And if so, are there pressures on that means and mechanism? That's something we'll try to look at. And the final thing, inshallah, we'll look at tonight is the commemoration of the martyrdom of the Holy Family, in particular what happened post-Ashura on the journey to Kufa and Sham, and ultimately the tragedy of the family of Imam al-Hussein, in particular his immediate family. This is our agenda for tonight. Wherever you are, here in Chicago or across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, when you come to Islam, you realize that in the early days, Islam, as Allah says in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Inna ad-Deena 'inda Allahi al-Islam. And we said, typically we say deen means religion, when in reality it means something deeper, it means something richer, it has a bit more depth. Because if you say, for example, Maliki Yawmid Deen, and you say master of the day of religion, that doesn't quite make sense. It's something else is being referred to here. Oftentimes they say judgment or something of that nature. That's why it's so difficult to fully translate anything from one language to another. There's an old Italian proverb that says that all translation is treason. The ironic part is that I've also translated that saying to you. And the idea is that whenever you translate something from one language to another, something is lost in translation. Similarly, when it comes to the Quran, there's a lot of depth there. So when we say deen, it's actually a complete way of life, is more closer to the real meaning. But if it's a complete way of life, it needs to tell me how to live, not how to die, not only just how to die. That is, the Quran and our Islam should not just be something that is there for when someone passes this world and leaves this world. I recite Fatiha, I take the Quran, I recite the Quran, and I bury this person. Those are what the religion's for. It has a much richer principle of how to live. So based on this, when we come to the first element, you will find that when Rasulullah, the religion of Allah, that is the way of life, in the Deen and Allah al-Islam, from the beginning to the end has been the same. From the time of Adam to Khatam has been the same. The only principle that has been changing is there has been an addition of Sharia in terms of the development of human beings' mind. But the concept was always the same. Monotheism, one God, no other God. The concept was always that, do good. The concept was always to have the best of akhlaq. And over time, as the intellect of humanity developed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala slowly added more and more Sharia, that is principles of jurisprudence. But in essence, from the time of Adam to the time of Musa, Judaism in its original form was the religion of Allah, as known as Islam in our vocabulary. Christianity in its original form was the religion of Allah, which we would call Islam. And of course, Islam is Islam. In fact, the first person who's called Muslim as per the Quran is Nabi Ibrahim, father Abraham, in the Abrahamic faiths. So the term Muslim was being used before Rasulullah. But what I'm trying to tell you is the original form of Judaism and original form of Christianity, which unfortunately we don't have today. And I'll try to explain in the next few nights why that is, what happened that caused these changes. Now, stay with me here. Rasulullah, in the early phases, in the early days of propagation of Islam, he would go to a particular place in order to get the revelation. This is where he would be in seclusion, as the narrations say, and then the wahi would come there. And as you know, it is the Ghar Hira, as it is typically known. And this was a solemn place where Rasulullah would get this revelation of the Quran. Now, with respect to the Quran, was the Quran revealed immediately, instantaneously, or gradually over 23 years? This is a common question that comes forward. Because oftentimes in Shahr Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan, we do the amal of Laylatul Qadr. And in Laylatul Qadr, we typically say the Quran was revealed in this night. And if we say the Quran was revealed in Laylatul Qadr, many people ask the question, which is a good question, that I heard and I thought that the Quran was revealed over 23 years, gradually to Rasulullah, one verse or a few verses at a time, with Jibreel revealing them. So what is it? Is it one night in Laylatul Qadr where Allah is saying, Inna anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr in the Quran, or is it gradually over 23 years? And the answer, as per the ulama, is that there is both an instantaneous revelation and a gradual revelation. The instantaneous revelation is in the night of Qadr and Laylatul Qadr, and that was the revelation of the Quran Quran from the Arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Baytul Ma'mur. Baytul Ma'mur, if you are aware or you may not be aware, this Kaaba that we have, that we go to in Hijaz, in Mecca, this is a replica. And you may say, a replica of what? And the answer that comes back from the scholars is, it is a replica of Allah's true house in the heavens. That is, from the Arsh of Allah, the throne of Allah, to Baytul Ma'mur, the house of Allah in the heavens, where the angels circumambulate and tawaf around, that is the true home of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, symbolically in the heavens. And so the Quran was instantaneously revealed from Arsh to Baytul Ma'mur. And then from Baytul Ma'mur, gradually over a period of 23 years, verse after verse after verse came to our realm, in our world. So it was simultaneous. You had both elements of the equation. Why am I sharing this? There was a spiritual significance of the Ghar Hira. That is, now Ghar, remember that word, because Arabic is a language which has some particularities that we need to be sensitive to, which I'll come to in a moment. Ghar Hira. This is where Rasulullah comes, and the first verse comes there with respect to Surah Alaq, the verses of Surah Alaq. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. According to the narrations, read in the name of your Lord. First element of the equation. Second, according to narrations, and this is a narration that even some of the strictest and most staunch and the most difficult muhaddithin who have rejected many of the other traditions of Karbala, they say this one you cannot reject, you have to be very careful because the evidence is quite strong. What is that? That in the bazaar of Kufa, after the tragedy of Karbala, after the day of Ashura, in the bazaar of Kufa, the head of Imam Hussein was on a spear. And when the head of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was on a spear, there were companions who were saying that they were from Rasulullah who were on the second floor, first floor, second floor, and they saw the head of Imam Hussein on a spear, and when they saw the head, the lips of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam were moving. And when the lips were moving, they were trying to listen as to what was being said. And when they put their ear close and they really paid diligence and they really focused and they gave their tawajjuh, they realized that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was reciting the Quran. And when he was reciting the Quran, what was he reciting? Which I remind you, which I began this conversation last year, and I'm building on once again. He was reciting the verses of chapter 18 of the Quran, verse 9 onwards. Surah Al-Kahf. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Am hasibta anna ashab al-kahfi wal-raqim kanu min ayatina ajaba. Now, the ulama, when they comment on this, they say that there were so many opportunities for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam to show major karamat throughout Karbala. But he did not use those very often. And when it came to a major karamat or miracle or mu'jiza, this is one of those moments that was stapled and stamped in the pages of history. Why? Why this recitation? Why this moment? And why these verses? It comes to our forefront. That is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites us to reflect on this perhaps. That why was Imam Hussein alayhi salam reciting this? What is the background of this? And what is the difference between the word in Arabic of ghar and kahf? What is the difference here? That is, I thought ghar also means, both of these are Arabic words by the way. Ghar I thought means cave, and I thought kahf means cave. What's the difference here? Allow me to try to explain and shed some light on this by giving you an example. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Whenever you come to the Quran, as per the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, the true Quran is in Arabic, as per the Quran saying itself. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't recite it in whatever language that you speak to try to learn some things. But when you go to the richness of the Quran, you will get a deeper meaning. For you who are in high school or college or about to go, I'll give you a simple example. If you take physics, if you've ever studied physics, if you plan to take it or something of this nature, you can take one form of physics, for example, that is algebra based. Or you can do a very simplified form of physics. And that will give you the basic principles of physics, F equals ma a and the likes. But again, then you can do that same physics in algebra form, and then you can do that in calculus form. And eventually you can do that even in further forms. Now the more deeper you go, the richer of an understanding you will get down the line. But in the beginning you can still get some basic principles. Now come back here. In the Quran, if you read it, for example, in English or Urdu or Farsi, you can get the themes of the Quran, inshallah. But if you want to go to the nuances and the depth, you need a little bit more tools in order to get to that end. For example, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wal Asr. We say this very famous chapter of the Quran, this very famous verses. By time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, wal Asr, right? Very famous verse. Asr means what? Time. Come with me to another verse of the Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Surah Dahr, Surah Insan, as is known Surah Insan, also known as Surah Dahr. This is one of those chapters which all Muslims agree came in honor of the Ahlul Bayt. There is no difference of opinion about this. That most scholars say all of it. Some scholars in Ahlul Sunnah say at least the first 18 verses. But nobody can deny these are in honor of Imam Ali, Bi Fatima, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein in the Ahlul Bayt. Now, based on this, what does that first verse mean? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Does man not recollect that there was a time where he was not worthy of mentioning? Dahr means time also. If you look at the translation, oftentimes in English or in Urdu, Dahr will say time and Asr will also say time. But any child knows that if it was the exact same word, Allah would have used the same word. Allah would have said Asr and Asr in both places, or He would have said Dahr and Dahr in both places. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't. There was a meaning, there was a purpose, there was some wisdom behind the selection of that language and that vocabulary. What was it? When you come to the answer, the ulama say that Asr has a meaning and Dahr has a meaning that is particular in nature. I'm trying to help you understand, and myself as well, the intricacy of the Quran and its language. That Asr refers to that time which is vanishing, that time which is ending, that time which is declining. That's why we say, for example, Salatul Asr, for example, the declining day. That is the time of this dunya, of this world in which you and I exist. That time is ending. But when it comes to Dahr in this context where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هَلْ أَتَى عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ حِينٌ مِنَ الدَّهْرِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. Does man not recollect that there was a time where he was not worthy of mentioning? This is that time which is unending time, infinite time. That time which the universe was continuing and you and I did not exist. It is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, oh man, don't get so arrogant, don't get so prideful. Had I not created you, you would not exist. And time would go on forever. This worldly life that we have, we think will live forever. And you see the likes of Qarun and Haman and Shaddad and Fir'aun and this person and that person, thinking that they can control the world and time will go on forever. But the history says that many Qaruns came, many Shaddads came, many Fir'auns came and they went, and there is no memory. What does mankind get arrogant about? Many Yazids came and went. What does man get arrogant about? But in that context, Allah is saying, be humble. Remember, you would not exist. This life that you have, it's declining. Do not waste time. Make the most use of your time. And that time is that time to be grateful to Allah, that had you not been created by Allah, time would have continued. Now come back to this. What's ghar and what is kahf? The ulama, when they explain this in the linguists of Arabic, say ghar is a small cave, a confined locality, whereas kahf is a spacious, bigger cave. And so these languages and these words are very significant when this comes to the forefront about what we are discussing and what we are talking about here. So these are some things that I've laid out, which I'm going to build on, inshallah, in the next phase of our conversation. Now, where did we leave off last time? And inshallah, we'll build this bridge to what we're discussing today. First level, we discussed last night a recap of what happened with the Jewish experience. First generation, gone in 100 years. Second generation came, 4 generations. They were essentially fully culturally Jewish, no longer religiously Jewish. Then we said, for example, there are the elements of the surveys that were done. People are becoming more cultural Jewish, less religious. And then the third thing that we mentioned was they built huge synagogues, nobody there. Then we gave the example that there's in Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica, I hope you did your research and your homework, you found the Hosei Day festival that was there, that began as the Hussein Day festival or its commemoration of Ashura, which today has become a festival where people drink and dance and they do all of these things. And that legacy of Ashura has been forgotten. So this has happened about 150 years in. So this is where we left off. Now comes the conversation about the next level of what we're building on. How do we make sure that our community is vibrant in the next generation, 2 generations, 3 generations? And this is going to require some strategy. But I remind you, and I remind myself, that sometimes we have one niyyah, sometimes we have one intention, sometimes we have one goal, and we think that if we do what we think is right, that will ultimately lead to the result that we think it will come to on the other side. So for example, we may think that at one time, for example, that I know how to run the community, I know how to run the family, I know how to run everything, and if I do it the way that I believe is right, then at the end of the day, things will work out fine. Of course, otherwise nobody will do it. Everyone thinks that they are right in their mind. But in reality, if we become a learning community, we can perhaps get a bit further. We learn from this person and that person, all the expertise. We put our minds together to get further. Allow me to explain. The Cobra effect, never forget it. I remind you, the Cobra effect took place in the history of India when the British came to colonize India. When the British first came to colonize India, they set up their camp in Delhi. They set up their capital in Delhi, the same where the Mongols had set up their camp. As you know, the Mughals. If you know, the Mughals were descendants from the Mongols, as you know, historically, much, much long ago. But the Mughals were people who had set up their base in Delhi, and over time, eventually the British came. When the British came, they set up their base in Delhi as well. When they set up their base in Delhi, they said, we have a problem here. The British said. So what's the problem? They said, we have an animal or a creature here that we don't know how to deal with. We've never dealt with before. I said, what is it? It's a snake. It's a cobra. We don't know how to deal with cobras. So what do we do? So they said, look, we will give a bounty for every cobra that is brought to us. So tell the locals, the British said, tell the locals, for every dead cobra that you bring to us, we will give you a bounty, we'll give you some money. So the idea was, you give this bounty and you pay some money, and eventually the cobras will all be gone. So what ended up happening was, they announced the next day that for every dead cobra you bring to us, the British, we will give you a ransom, we'll give you a bounty, we'll pay you money. So the first day, people brought cobras, dead cobras, the British paid, they paid. And so they're observing the graph. Remember, I said yesterday, we live in a data-centric world. You use data to make decisions at work. We make data-based decisions. You even make decisions in the Imam Barga. What's going to get the most people? You get the speakers and the talkers and the Nawakhans who get the most numbers. It's data-based. It's based on numbers. So they were looking at the numbers. And in the first few days, the numbers began to decline. And week 1, decline. And the numbers decline. Plan is going as expected. Then eventually it began to stabilize and level out, and they're like, interesting, okay, it's not going to zero, but it's leveling off, still not bad. But eventually then the graph of the snakes and the cobras began to rise again. And when it began to rise, the British became alarmed and said, what's going on here? We understand the decline, we understand the stabilization, but now there's a slow increase. What's going on here? So they launched an investigation. When they launched an investigation, the report came back and they analyzed the report that we have administered a program where we are giving a bounty and we are paying for the heads of each of these cobras, and rather than the number going down, now we're seeing an uptick. What is going on? And the British found that for the first time, somebody had given them a run for their money. That is, when they came to India and they launched this program, the local Indians realized that this was an economic opportunity, and so rather than just going with the flow, they said, let us now farm cobras and snakes so that we can benefit from the profit. So rather than just having 1 or 2 snakes, they started breeding these snakes and bringing the dead ones to the British, and eventually getting these payments. When the British found out that they were being played, they got very upset. And they said that from tomorrow there will be no bounty paid for any of these snakes. And when this news reached the ears of the local Indians, they said, oh really? Is that the case? Very well. And what they decided to do was, they took all of those snakes that they had farmed and they released them into the city. And so now, where the British were wanting to remove and eliminate the cobras and the snakes, the intended result and desire at the other end was that there will be no more snakes and we'll be fine. The actual outcome was they ended up with more snakes than they originally had. This is called unintended consequences. This is called second-degree thinking. This will help you in the stock market, not financial advice, if you're interested. To understand how the other person's thinking on the other side. Why am I saying this? You may say, we're getting youth to the Majlis, we're getting them to the Imam Baga, they're there. You may say that, you tell your child, be there, otherwise this consequence or that consequence. And you think you're doing the right thing with sincerity, but the repercussion may be, and I'm seeing this over and over again, that child hits 18, 22, or 26, they go off on the other side of the country, and oftentimes they never come back. Now I'm not saying that discipline should not be there, discipline should be there. I mean, Trust me, there was times when my parents asked me to do my math homework, I didn't want to do it because I didn't know the wisdom at the time, but I'm thankful and glad that they told me at that time. But what I'm trying to say is something a little bit more delicate here. That you may be thinking things are going great. The children are reciting Marcia, the children are reciting Noah, they're doing all of these things. Beautiful, fantastic, it's beautiful. But you may think that that is sufficient, but I'm inviting you to think that that's necessary, but it may or may not be sufficient. We may need more with respect to keeping our generations around. The example is, someone recites the Quran. There are many young people and old who know the verses of the Quran by heart. But if you ask them what it means, they may have no idea. They may have no clue about what does this actually mean. Does it mean one should not recite and memorize the Quran? No, it's very good, it's very good. What I'm saying is, you may need to look at other things. Allow me to explain. There's a bias, and I'm building all of these points, you'll need to know it down the line. Survivorship bias. Look, I don't have time to waste, and I hope you don't either. The time here is very valuable. I respect your time is extremely valuable, and believe me, I don't want to be traveling. I have to travel because I don't see these messages coming out anywhere else. And it's a huge cost for me to be here, opportunity-wise, economically, stress-wise, travel-wise, it's not easy. So I beg your indulgence because I have a message to give here. Survivorship bias. Have you ever heard your elders or someone say in the community, oh, you tell them, Baba, Mama, eat healthier. Like, don't eat so much ghee, don't eat so much nahari, don't eat so much X, Y, and Z, don't go to Divan Street so much, like, take it easy. Maybe exercise a little bit, eat fruit, stuff like that, right? And they say, oh, your aunt or your uncle or your this and that, they lived up to 90, and they ate this and they ate that and they smoked and they did all that. What is that? That is something called survivorship bias. Allow me to explain. In World War II, there were the Royal Air Force, that is the British Air Force, they had planes. And when they had these planes, they had guns on them. These planes, they went into the field, and when they went to the field, they went to military combat, shooting at one another. And eventually, when these planes came back from the field, they had mathematicians and statisticians whose job was to analyze these planes. When they analyzed these planes, they realized that they needed to reinforce these planes in the most vulnerable locations. And the goal was that we need to put armor in the places where these planes are most vulnerable. So they said that wherever the most bullet holes are, then that's where we need to put the armor. You cannot put additional armor over the whole plane, otherwise the whole plane won't be able to take off, it won't be able to land. So you have to pick the select place that is most vulnerable. So the statisticians and the mathematicians who eventually actually solved World War II and many of the things, but they came forward and they said, okay, we've analyzed the planes and we know where to put the bullets. They said, you need to put the bullets on the wings. And I said, why? They said, because that is where the most bullets are. Now, if you want to, I'm going to give you a side note. I'm connecting two very important points. This is survivorship bias. The other term, the other vocabulary you need to know is something called groupthink. If you want to know the theme of the Quran from beginning to end, number one, it's Tawheed. But within Tawheed, the means to get to Tawheed, all of the prophets had to fight something called groupthink. Remember that word, I'm going to come back to it. So now what happened? All the statisticians and mathematicians said, we need to put all the new armor on the wing. Now think about this, you're in the job, and you're seeing the situation. What is more politically and economically safe for you? What's more economically and politically safe for you as a member of that team is to just go with the flow. Everyone's saying that it's the wings, but you know that maybe they're missing something. Do you speak out or not? Do you say something or not? Or do you remain silent or not? So what happened? There was one statistician who had the courage to stand up and speak out, and he said, you guys are missing something. They said, what do you mean? What are we missing? He said that you are analyzing only those planes that came back from the field. You are not analyzing those planes that we lost. They said, what do you mean? He said, you need to go to the field and find those planes that did not come back, the ones that crashed. Analyze those as well. And when they went to the field, they said, very well, they went to the field. When they went to the field, they found that those planes that had crashed and did not come back were indeed hit in a different place than the ones that came back. And they were hit in the most vulnerable place, which was the cockpit, where the pilot was. And he said, that is where you need to put the additional armor, where the pilot is. And they all understood that what they were doing was survivorship bias. They were taking a biased sample of only those planes that came back. They were not considering the whole sample of all the other ones that had gone down the way. Why is this important? When you and I say that, mashallah, the youth are coming, people are coming, there's people here, we are accounting for those people that are physically here. We are not accounting for those who are not here, number one. Number two, we are not accounting for those who have been forced to come by their parents. Number three, we are not accounting for those people who are physically here, but mentally they've checked out. They're not physically here. And there are dozens of them. And this is the challenge that we are facing. The same example of when your parents say that your grandmother lived till 90, you're not accounting for all of those people. I asked one of my friends, who's a doctor, a cardiologist, who said that, why didn't they have all these things in the past? Like, you didn't hear about people dying from heart attack and this and that, all and that. He said, yeah, cause of death at that time was dam tod diya. That's what they would say. Dam tod diya. They had no cause of death. So the person, they think it's this and they think it's that. Now we know the intricacies of how someone passed away and died. Now we know how to capture that data, but we still are living in that old paradigm. So remember these two things: survivorship bias and groupthink. The Quran from beginning to end is a fight against groupthink. What do I mean? Tawheed, establishment of Tawheed. Let's go to Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam, the Quran says, for 1,000 years, less 50. Alf as-sinin illa khamsina ama, the Quran says. Although Nuh alayhi salam propagated for longer, but the Quran wrote this line in particular, that's why I'm quoting it. For 950 years, Nuh is propagating. He did more, but the Quran says this amount. And when he did this, the people were not listening. All of the people had come to a conclusion and they were living one reality which they believed was the truth. But Nuh was saying, you're on the wrong path. In fact, Nuh's own wife and Nuh's own son were not even on his page. That means that even a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their closest family members may not be there. As you know, Nuh wanted his son to come onto the ship, onto the ark, when the water was rising. And at that point in time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِ إِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. Allah says with respect to Nuh's son, you think he's your son. He was his biological son, but he said, he's not, as per the definition of the Quran. That means that there must be alignment of the heart and the mind as per the truth. So first principle, Noah is fighting and he's as in spiritually and symbolically and metaphorically to try to get people to believe, number one. Number two, Ibrahim alayhi salam. We think Ibrahim's story starts much, much later. We think the story of Ibrahim sacrificing his son is the first. No, Ibrahim's story in the Quran and Islam starts much earlier. For example, Ibrahim is young and he's in his youth and he's looking towards the sky and he says, this star, this kawkab, hada Rabbi. Ibrahim, of course you know of all people that this star cannot be your Lord. How are you saying this? Perhaps Ibrahim would tell us, wait a second. So this star, the people are looking at the star with Ibrahim, and the star begins to decline and begins to move, and when it begins to decline and it begins to move, eventually it disappears. And when it disappears, Ibrahim says, hold on a second. This star disappeared? It can't be my Lord. It can't be my Rabb. My Lord is not the one who disappears. My Lord is the one who created the heavens and earth. He was inviting the people to get away from their groupthink, to think about who is the one who created the star, who is the one who created the universe. At another moment when he's destroying the idols, and he's telling people, why don't you ask the idols? The same way Rasulullah would, for example, invite the people. You think these idols are everything. Groupthink, fighting groupthink. And do you know in psychology, this is one of the most difficult things to fight. If everyone has come to one agreement in your community, in your society, in your country, to stand up and speak out and say you may all have it wrong is the most difficult thing psychologically for a human being to do. Because nobody wants to be alien. No one wants to be a fish out of water. Nobody wants to be seen as other than. No one wants to be seen as aloof. Nobody wants to be seen as someone who's outside that realm. And this is the story. Why Ashab al-Kahf? Why is the Imam giving us this notion? What is the background? What is the connection? Ghar of Hira, Ashab al-Kahf, this notion. Now I give you the next principle. And this is what we'll build on in the next few nights. And it's an analogy that will help you, inshallah. It's over 2,000 years old. There are three great Greek philosophers of the ancient era: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates, Aflatun, and Arastu. Now, before you say where am I coming from, some of our scholars in the Hausa hypothesize that Arastu may have been a prophet. They don't know definitively, but they say based on his teachings, his focus on Tawheed, his principles of justice and righteousness, they say it's possible that he was a prophet. We don't have the name of all 124,000 prophets. The Quran only tells us a few, or Riwayat tells us a few, but it's very possible based on the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would send a prophet to Europe and East Africa, or to East Asia and all over the world. So they hypothesize that it is. So stay with me here. As you know, Socrates did not write himself. He was inviting the people towards justice, but they put a fake case on him, and eventually they caused him to kill himself or drink poison, and he was put to death, Socrates, by drinking hemlock. His student, Aflatun, was very upset by the unjust killing of his teacher, as you know. So he wrote, Socrates did not write, Aflatun wrote. Aflatun wrote a book called The Republic, a very old book. And in that he writes an allegory, an analogy, which we would often call in Arabic and Urdu and Farsi, like isti'ara, which he invites us to reflect on, and I invite you to reflect on, which will build up inshallah in the next few nights. What happens? Imagine that you are in a cave, in a kahf, and you are in this cave, and I'm giving you some terminology that it's on a side note, it's in the hashia, it's a side note. I'm telling you this so you and I can communicate, otherwise you don't know this terminology that I'm about to say. So you're in this kahf, you don't know it's a kahf, you are facing the wall, you don't know it's a wall, and your hands are tied to the ceiling facing this wall. The entrance is behind you, and next to you are some friends or some companions. Left, right, there are people there. There's people with you in the same situation as you. Your hands are tied to the ceiling and you're facing the wall and you cannot turn around. The entrance is behind you. You don't know it's called an entrance. And you have been in this situation your whole life. And when you look at the wall, every so often, something moves on the wall. And when you see something move on the wall, you're analyzing and you look at each other and you're like, this is it, this is reality, this is everything. And you have lived all of your life in this way, and this is all that you have known. And then Aflatun says, now imagine that only you and only your hand gets loose. Your hands get loose for the first time ever. Your companions in the cave are in the same situation. They cannot move. But for the first time, your hands get loose and your hands are able to wiggle out. And your hands are released from the chains that are going to the ceiling, which you don't even know it's called the ceiling, going to the roof. And when your hands get loose for the first time in your life, you turn around. And when for the first time in your life you turn around, you see the entrance of the cave, which you don't even know is called an entrance of the cave. It could be called the exit of the cave, for all you know. It could be called anything. So you see that, but you see something which we call light. You don't know what it's called. You see light. And now you begin to proceed towards it. When you begin to proceed towards it, your eyes are hurting. Your eyes are hurting because all you have known in your whole life is darkness. And for the first time you are going towards light. And as you are getting closer to the light, your eyes are hurting more and more because you're going darkness to light. From dhulumati ilan nur. And as you're going closer and closer, now questions are appearing in your mind. Should I stay or should I go? Should I proceed or should I stay where I am? What's going to happen on the other side? Should I end up going? And then you get to the edge of this entrance, or opening of the cave, I should say. When you get to the edge and to the opening, now you are thinking to yourself, should I get up and leave or should I stay? Is there risk on the other side? Could I be killed? Could I be hurt? Could I be harmed? What's going to happen? But you gather the courage and you step out. And when you gather this courage and you step out for the first time, you then take one step, and now the question in your mind is coming, how far do I go? Do I go 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps? If I go too far, will I be able to come back? Will I be able to find my way back? Do I want to go far? Do I even want to go out or not? What do I do? He says you proceed then. You gather the courage, some more strength, and you say, I'm going to go. And you decide to go. You take a few more steps, up until the point that you look over a hill and you see something you've never seen before. You see civilization. You see a world, you see a city, you see downtown, you see skyscrapers, you see trucks, you see trains, you see airplanes, you see buildings, you see people, you see a bustling metropolis. And you go there and you begin to say to people, hey, what is this? What is this? And they tell you it's Chicago or New York or LA, and they tell you these are skyscrapers. What are these buildings called? They're called skyscrapers. Oh, what's that? It's a plane. What's that? That's a train. What is that? That's a car. What is that? This is a light post. This is that. And you are shocked. Like, wow, plane, train, light post, buildings, skyscrapers. I never knew. And then you say, hold on, guys, what is that? What is that thing that I just came from? And they say to you, oh, that's called a cave. You say, oh, a cave, oh. Oh, and sometimes you're facing like there's something that you know, toward that makes up the inside of the cave. What do you call it? Oh, you mean the wall? Yeah, that's the wall, okay. And sometimes you see some things moving on the wall. What do you call that? They're like, moving on the wall. Oh, you mean shadows? Shadows. Oh, shadows. He said, what happens? When people pass by the entrance of the cave, sometimes they block the light and then you see movement on the wall. That's called shadows. And you say, wow, cave, wall, shadows. I never knew. And you realize to yourself that this is reality. And all that you were living in there was not reality. And when you realize that, Aflatun says, now you gather the courage and you go back to the cave that you came from. And when you go back to that cave, now your eyes are hurting the other way because you're going from light to darkness again. And now your eyes hurt again. And when you enter again, you begin to go in a state of excitedness. In excitement, you enter into the cave. When you enter in the cave, you begin to go back to where you came from. You go back to where your friends are, your companions are. You go back to that wall. You go back to where the chains were. And then you see your friends in that same state that you were in some time ago. And you look at them. And you say, guys, this is not reality. Reality's out there. There's a whole world. There's a metropolis. There's a city center. There's skyscrapers. There's planes. There's trains. There's everything. And Aflatun, Plato says, what will your companions think? What will they do? He says, they will think you have gone mad. They will think that you have gone insane. They will think that you have lost your mind. Why? Because they have no reference point to understand what you are saying. The one who left the cave and came back was Rasulullah. The one who left the cave and came back was Amir al-Mu'mineen. The one who left the cave and came back was Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He was telling the people during the time of Yazid, you are calling this Islam, but it's not Islam. Don't you see that Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar is not upheld? Do you not see that it has just been given the varnish in the name of Islam? Inside is no Islam. Do you not see that the halal of Muhammad has become haram and the haram of Muhammad has become halal? Do you not see? And yet they could not see because they did not have that reference point. They could not fathom what it meant to leave the cave and come back. They could not fathom what reality is. You may find in our world that the same problems may persist till this day. And this is what I was saying may be very difficult, especially when you come to this reality, because it becomes an existential crisis for some. That if this is not it, what is it? You may realize that it gets more complicated because there's not only one cave. There may be many caves. You and I may be in one type of cave. Someone else is in another type of cave. Someone else in a third cave. And you may find that it gets even more complicated because there can be caves within caves, within caves. And the question then becomes is, what are you and I seeking? Are we seeking the truth or are we seeking to validate our own view? And that's the most difficult question that no one has the courage to tell you. And the reason is because this mimbar, which is the mimbar of Rasulullah and Imam Hussein, the same way that other institutions and organizations have pressure on it, it also has pressure. And because of that pressure, you and I are not able to get true Islam. We are able to get one form of Islam, one slice of Islam, one angle of Islam. But Islam in totality, you will not be able to get from the mimbar. This is the first statement that I'm giving you, that I don't invite you to accept blindly. Criticize it, analyze it, sleep on it, think about it. We have another couple of days together. Think about it and really analyze it. To try to understand that the zaman and the makan matters. The time and space in which you are matters. There were things and there are things that may work in another time, in another place, in another era. Or sometimes in the same era, in the same time, but different zamans, different makans. Same zaman, different makans. You see, and I remind you of this example, inshallah we'll go to Masayib. It's a weekday, I won't take much of your time, but remember, as our time and space dictates how we think, as philosophers said in the last several hundred years, the way we think, the way we operate impacts how we operate in our world. When you go to, for example, the Muslim world, many Muslim countries, when you go to, for example, a Shia predominant country, if you go to, for example, a non-Muslim or a more diverse country, you'll find different views and different beliefs. For example, when it comes to the issue of, for example, let's take a place like Pakistan, for example. In Pakistan, for example, the debates oftentimes, they would be on, or they are debating in the practicing community. Ask me about all those people who come from Pakistan and India who are Pakistani Shia or non-Shia, or grad student colleagues of mine who became atheists and stuff when they come here, or even over there, they're in Taqiyya, the other way. Nonetheless, in the practicing community, does the debate begin with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Often not. People accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does the debate begin with Rasulullah? Oftentimes not. People don't have a choice. They have to believe in Rasulullah, or if nothing else, they're afraid of Tawheen Risalah, that they'll be killed unjustly or something like this. So they don't really debate about that. But often the debate starts with the issue of who is Khalifa bila fasad. So in responding to the environment, a lot of the focus is on Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is our Imam and our Mawla, no doubt. But you have to understand the situation, the environment in which that arose, number one. Number two, in a place like Iran, in modern day Iran, post-Safavid era, post last 400 years, predominantly Iran is all monolithic Shia, 95-96%. The rest are some small minorities here. So does the debate start with Allah? In the practicing community, does the debate start with Allah? No, everyone accepts Allah. Does the debate start with Rasulullah? No, people accept Rasulullah. Does the debate start with Imam Ali? Not even that. People accept Imam Ali. So issues like your marja, my marja, these issues become the issues of the day. Now come to the West, now come to Europe, now come to America. Does the debate in our society start with Imam Ali alayhi salam? Do people even know in our communities, in our society, if you go to University of Chicago, if you go to Northwestern, if you go to some of these great schools that you have, do people even know who Imam Ali is? One of the first major books in recent times, that in contemporary times, that was written on the life of Imam Ali in academia was by Dr. Hassan Abbas from our community, The Prophet's Heir. It was a great work and contribution when it was not even, much of that work was not even there on the life of Imam Ali. So most people don't even know who Imam Ali is. They know Muhammad Ali the boxer, they don't know who he's named after. Do they know about Rasulullah? Yeah, they may know the name Muhammad, but they have a distorted view of Muhammad, the Holy Prophet, based on this notion of what they've been told in popular conscience. And is he the first thing on their mind? No. So in this society, oftentimes you have to start from scratch, and that scratch is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to first explain Allah Azza wa Jal. Because then on that you build Rasulullah, and on that you build the Ahlul Bayt. I'm not saying it's differentiated, but the same group of people, a father and son, can be in the same household, and there can be different needs for each of them. If you remember nothing else, remember this example. True story. I was in a community, and there was a president in one of the communities in North America who was about 40 years old, young guy, and he had lived both lives. He had lived his whole life in America, and he had grown up in the cultural environment back home. And he said, Sayyid, you need to talk to these people. So what do you mean these people? He said, these elders in the community. I said, what do you mean? Explain, please. He said, we were doing, spring cleaning. Like there's people who volunteer and spend their time here, and they try to clean the mosque in Imam Barga. May Allah bless them. So he said, we were cleaning the Zari room. Where the Alam and the Tazi and the Zari are. And he said, we were cleaning it, and there was 3 generations. Myself, the older generation, the younger generation. So in that room, we're cleaning the Zari room, and in that there's elderly ladies, there are my age group, and there are some youngsters. And at that point in time, one of the elderly ladies, our aunts, our mothers, somebody who could be our aunt or our mother, is there, and she says, can you pass me this stick? The stick. And he said, Sayyid, I passed the stick that she wanted me to pass. I took it, I passed it to her, and she took it, and she got upset. So what do you mean? She got upset. She said, you disrespected it. I said, Sayyid, he said to me, Sayyid, you need to talk to these people. They're doing idolatry. They're doing idol worship. I said, hold on a second. What happened? What do you mean? He said, she said that I disrespected the stick. Baba, it's just a stick. I said, hold on a second. What stick was it? He said it was a stick, for the alam. I said, hold on a second. That which you called a stick, to her was not a stick. To her, that stick was the stick of the alam of Hazrat Abbas. To you, that was just a stick. You see, these are two ways of looking at the same thing. The reality was for her that had a significance because you cannot separate the alam from the thing that makes the alam. You cannot separate. So in her mind, that was right. And maybe in your mind, for that, because you did not grow up in that environment, you did not see that, it was just to stick to you. I'm trying to explain to you that the same reality can be different for two different people. There's a word for this in English. It's called being ethnocentric. Ethnocentricity is when I take my worldview and I impose it on you, or you do the same onto me. I'll give you an example. I had a professor who would go to Japan to do conferences and teach and things of this nature, and he would be invited, engineering professor. He said, one time I went, there were only, in my hotel, he said, there were just robots, and there were no human beings. The robot gave me my keys, and I went, and he was saying, Japan's really ahead in a lot of things. He said, another time I went, before that, he said, a hotel I checked into, I noticed something different culturally. He said, what happened? He said, I went in, and then I got my room, I got my things, and I took my key, and then I put my things in the room, and I just left the door as is, and then I went outside for a minute, and I came back. When I came back in my room in Japan, my things were gone. I got upset. He said, I went to the front desk. What happened? He said, I just checked into the room. It's hardly been a couple of minutes. My things are gone. What's going on? They looked at him, they said, doctor, they said, professor, you see, what happened was there was a family that was coming. We didn't know they were coming and we needed to accommodate them. So we had accidentally given you a bigger room. So we moved and shifted your things to a smaller room that's still bigger than the one you paid for. So it's nice, but it's not as big because we need to accommodate this family of 4 people and they don't have a place. So we put them in that room that you were in and we moved your things on your behalf for free and we didn't even ask you for a tip or a thank you. And he was saying, I was shocked because to me this was a gross violation of my privacy. They picked up my things without my consent and they moved it. He said, I realized at that point in time there's 2 things to see. There's always at least 2, if not more, ways to see something. If you remember nothing else, remember this. There are always 3 sides to every coin. Heads, tails, and the edge. And oftentimes we are only looking at one side of the equation. We are not looking at the other side. What am I saying here? You may find that for you and your environment, there is the aspect of the commemoration of Sayyid al-Shuhada in a particular way. But when you are doing it without even thinking, there are connections in your mind. When you say Ali, it is automatically connected to Rasulullah. When you say Rasulullah, it's automatically connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you say Ali, it's not disconnected. That chain is going ultimately to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for the next generation, nobody's clarified that. Nobody's gone through that. So when they sit in the majlis, they're thinking, hold on a second, when is Allah going to be mentioned? And so somebody who's grown up in that, they're thinking the whole time Allah's being mentioned. It's implicit. But the younger generation, those things have not been conveyed. And so when you look at this, you're comparing their understanding to your understanding, which is seeing 2 different worlds. And nobody's able to say this. Why? Because there is fear from this mimbar. Why? The same way that Aflatun was saying his teacher is the one who left the cave, Socrates, and he came back and told the people the reality, and they killed him. The people on the mimbar have pressures, because if they tell you something that you have not heard before, you will cause a commotion and a riot. And you will say that I never heard this for 40 years. And so what they do is they bring it to the edge of their tongue and they swallow it back down because of the repercussions. And nobody has the courage to say this to you. Why? Because the Quran tells you exactly why. In verse 155 of Surah Baqarah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُم مُّصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ. Verily and most surely we will test you with khawf, with fear, وَالْجُوعِ, hunger, وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ, and loss of wealth. Wal anfus. Anfus meaning your souls or your lives. That is your loved ones. Death will happen to your loved ones. Wa thamarat. 5th one. Thamarat meaning what? Thamarat meaning fruits. Ya Allah, you're going to test me with fruits? No. Fruits means your children. One of the biggest tests. Allah is saying that you will be tested. So these pressures still persist. And because of the economics of the equation, oftentimes truth is not stated. Because there is a big cost for the truth to be stated. We have made a systematic error as a community. What is that systematic error? We have made the main form of livelihood of our ulama and our scholars and our zakirin and our khutaba this mimbar. And the problem with that is they have 2 months, 8 days. and Shahr Ramadan perhaps, if lucky, to earn their livelihood many times. And in that environment, are they going to tell you what you need to hear, or are they going to tell you what you want to hear? And this is one of the challenges that we're faced, and nobody has the courage to say this because there's a cost to saying these things. I'm able to say these things to you because I'm at that phase of my career where I don't want to be coming back to lecturing. There's no glamour in this for me. I'm losing economically every moment I'm sitting here. My PhD is in engineering. I could be making hundreds of thousands of dollars like a lot of you are here. But why am I not doing that? Because I'm seeing a situation where no one's stepping up to the plate. And the reality is there's a big gap between the qawl and the fi'al. There's a huge gap between what we're saying and what we're doing. We're telling our next generation that Islam is primary, but all of our actions say otherwise. And nobody has the courage to say that. It was not easy what Imam Hussein did. It took courage for what Imam Hussein did. But if Imam Hussein teaches us anything, it is that we should have courage in difficult circumstances. Otherwise, you lose out. What did Imam Hussein says? And I'm concluding here. He has a conversation with Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar is in Mecca. Imam Hussein is leaving Medina to come towards Mecca. When he's leaving towards there, Abdullah ibn Umar goes there, does his business. He went there for business, did business in Mecca, and he did Umrah. When he heard Imam Hussein is coming, he decided that I'm going to leave Mecca. But Allah would have it that they actually met one another, Imam Hussein and Abdullah ibn Umar. And Abdullah ibn Umar says to Imam Hussein, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, everyone's already done the bay'ah of Yazid. Why don't you also do it? Just join in. Why ruffle the, why shake the boat? Why rock the boat? Why ruffle feathers? Just go with the flow. Imam Hussein, it's a documented line that he says that baffles the mind. He says, Abdullah ibn Umar, do you know something? He says, what is it, Ibn Rasulullah? You know, there's many parallels between Imam Hussein alayhi salam and Nabi Yahya, John the Baptist. Both of them were 6 months in the womb, prematurely born. Yahya and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Both of them were beheaded. Both of them went through all of these similarities. He says, Abdullah ibn Umar, do you know that Banu Israel, they beheaded Yahya, John the Baptist? And do you know that they gave his head to an indecent woman? And do you know, Abdullah ibn Umar, that between dawn and sunrise, they butchered 70 prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, Abdullah ibn Umar, do you know that after they did that, they went to their markets and their shops and their businesses as if nothing happened? He said, Abdullah ibn Umar, do you know that Allah gave them lag, Allah gave them respite, Allah did not punish them right away. But then eventually the punishment of Allah came. He said, Abdullah ibn Umar, this is the same situation right now. It is as if Imam Hussein is foreshadowing what's about to happen in Karbala. The question remains, when we see difficulties, when we see challenging things, do I have the ability and the courage to do the same thing that Nuh and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa and Rasulullah and Imam Hussein and all of the Ahlul Bayt did? They spoke out in a difficult time. Now I know that each Imam had a different procedure and a different way in different zaman and makan. So I'm not saying it always has to be the same way. Sometimes it can be speaking, sometimes it can be writing, sometimes it can be coming, sometimes it can be not coming, sometimes it can be something else. You need to decide, and we need to decide together, what is it that can help us get the true religion of Islam as per the Ahlul Bayt wanting us to get it. That is for this society, for this generation, so they understand the Quran and Islam and the Ahlul Bayt from here and from here, so that they walk and talk and breathe it. We'll continue this inshallah tomorrow. Tonight we move our hearts and our minds to post Ashura, after Karbala. And this narration, it begins from the day of Ashura itself and takes us on the way further on. What happened? The narrations say that before we even get there, on the 10th of Muharram, the Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he had a daughter who was the peace and the tranquility of his heart. They say that Imam Hussein alayhi salam, in Salatul Layl, in Namaz al-Shab, he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a daughter who would be a sakina for his heart, a sukoon for his heart, a peace for his heart, a tranquility tranquility for his heart. Subhanallah, the verse of the Quran that was revealed earlier, but in its ta'wil it refers to Imam Hussein. What is it? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to Imam Hussein, O soul that is at rest, Ya ayyatuha an-nafsul mutma'inna. The soul that is at rest is Imam Hussein, and the one who puts the soul of Imam Hussein at rest is Sakina bint al-Hussein. This great individual, 4 years old. Imam al-Hussein leaves the tent on the day of Ashura for the last time. The narrations say he comes towards his horse. When he comes towards his horse, Zul-Janah, he wants to get on his horse, Zul-Janah, but he looks left and he looks right, and he calls out, O Zuhair, O Habib, O Qasim, O Ali Akbar, I helped you onto your horse. Where are you to help me onto my horse? And they say that perhaps the companions would have responded and they would have said, O Aba Abdullah, death has separated us from you, but if we had the opportunity and we had the option, we would give our lives 1,000 times over for you. Yabna Rasulullah, ajrukum ala Allah. Imam Hussein, he gets on the horse himself and he wants to move forward, and he notices that Zul-Janah is not moving forward, and when he notices this and he says to Zul-Janah, O Zul-Janah, from the morning you are hungry and I am hungry, you are thirsty and I am thirsty, you are tired and I am tired, you have been carrying body and I have been carrying body, this is the final one, I won't trouble you after that. Zul-Janah, he puts his head down as if he is looking down towards his hooves, towards his feet. Imam Hussein looks down. What does he see? He sees a 4-year-old Sakina bint al-Hussein holding on to the hooves of the horses. May Allah not show any father this day that his child is doing this and holding on to the hooves of the horses. But what is she saying? Imam Hussein, he perhaps takes his ear close. What does he hear? Bibi Sakina is saying, O Zul-Janah, do not take my father to the battlefield. Why? Because whoever has gone since the morning, they have not returned. Imam Hussein gets down from the horse. When he gets down from the horse, he says, Sakina, perhaps I can get you some water. Perhaps I will go and get you some water. Allow me to go. Bibi Sakina would have said, Imam Hussein, don't go. My father, Baba, don't go. Why? Whoever has gone since the morning, they have not come back. My uncle Abbas said the same thing. He never came back from the battlefield. Baba, stay here, don't go. Ajrukum ala Allah. The conversation between daughter and child continued. Imam Hussein is speaking, Bibi Sakina is listening, and then finally Bibi Sakina says, very well, Baba, if you are going to go, then at least just let me do one thing. He says, what? He says, let me sleep on your chest one final time. Baba, lay down on the plains of Karbala. Imam Hussein lays down on the plains of Karbala. Bibi Sakina lays on the chest of Imam Hussein. She falls asleep, and when she falls asleep, she becomes quiet. At that point, then she wakes up. When she wakes up, she cries. She says, Baba, go towards the battlefield. I won't stop you. He says, why? He says, Baba, I saw my grandmother Fatima az-Zahra. Baba, no, I won't stop you. Go. Imam Hussein, Allah knows how he separated his daughter from his chest. There are no words for this moment, but perhaps the heart of Sakina is captured in 2 lines by the poet Mir Anis, where he says, Neend aayegi jab aapki boo paungi Baba, main raat ko maqtal mein chali aaungi Baba, that I will sleep when I will find your fragrance, oh Baba. In the night I will come to the battlefield where you are. Ajrukum ala Allah. May Allah not show any child this day. Final riwayah, I won't take much of your time. They say that when Sham-e-Ghariban happened, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was martyred, that very first moment where Imam Hussein is martyred, do you know what happened? Zul-Janah saw that Imam Hussein has been martyred. He was from the family he knew. He went to Imam Hussein. He brushed some blood of Imam Hussein on his skin, on his hair, on his mane. Zul-Janah brushed this, and then he went towards the tents. He went towards the tents of the Ahlul Bayt because he had to give the message. When Zul-Janah came back after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, he came to the tents. He came straight to a 4-year-old Sakina bint al-Hussein. She saw the blood on Zul-Janah. She said, Zul-Janah, I understood. understood. Zuljana, I got the message. Zuljana, I understand. But I have one question for you. And that question is this. Hal suqiya abi am qutila tushana. Oh Zuljana, did my father get any water? Or did he die thirsty? Did they give him any water? Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulullah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'minin. Sallallahu alayki ya Fatimah al-Zahra Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alamin. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا سيدي ومولاي بالفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين معتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا غریب الغربا تجھ سے ملنے کے لیے کتنے میلوں کا سفر تیری زینب نے کیا ہے اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا مجھ کو پردیس میں یہ بات رلاتی ہی رہی دور ہوں گھر سے مگر سر پہ ردا ہے بھائی بنت زرا نے مگر شام و کوفہ کا سفر بے ردا کیسے کیا ہے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا غریب الغربا تیرے دیدار بنا بھائی نہیں رہ سکتی غم میں فرقہ کا تیری اور نہیں سہ سکتی کیا مجھے بھول گئے تم کو بہنا سے ملے ایک برس بیت گیا ہے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا
میرے بھائی
رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا تم کو زندہ میں کہیں قید نہ کر لے کوئی میرے بابا کی طرح زر نہ دے دے کوئی جی نہیں پاؤں گی میں سن کے مر جاؤں گی میں تم کو گر کچھ بھی ہوا ہے غریب الغربا اے میرے تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا غریب الغربا باپ کی طرح میرے سر پہ تیرا سایہ ہے اپنی بیٹی کی طرح تو نے مجھے پالا ہے تو ہے بھائی جہاں مجھ کو بلوا لے وہاں ہوگا احسان تیرا ہے اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا ساتھ ہم ہوتے اگر شام کو جاتے بھائی پھر سکینہ کے لیے اشک بہتے بھائی کیا نہیں تم کو خبر آ گیا ماہ سفر وار سے کر بو بلا ہے اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا موت سے پہلے مجھے ملنے برادر آ جا اپنی صغرا کے لیے اے میرے اکبر آ جا دل میں حسرہ ہے میرے دیکھ لوں چہرہ تیرا پھر مجھے آئے قضا ہے اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا اے تکلم یہ بہن بھائی پہ جان دیتی تھی سن کے بھائی کی خبر خاک پہ یہ ایسے گری لب پہ تھا رضا دل پہ قابو نہ رہا کھا گئی اس کو قضا ہے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تجھ پہ ہم شیر فدا یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا سيدي ومولاي بالفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك تسة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء السلام عليك شمس الشموس ونيس النفوس أيها المدفون بأرض الطوس الراضي بالقدر والقضاء ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا صاحب الأسوى الزمان السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته